What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in on a late Sunday night where the Suns get embarrassed. Really good start to the game against the P-Wolves, and then they just completely fall apart after that, losing 116-98. They dropped to 28-33 now on the year. Not great. Connor Moreno was there getting in on the game and joins us from Flipper Arena. Tough game. Lot to talk about. Kind of just jump into what was it like there in the locker room? What was it like with the team afterwards? Because it just another kind of just collapse by the Suns here again tonight.
Yeah, no, the locker room was just tense. That's pretty much the only way I can say it. It was tense. No one was happy about the performance. We talked to KD and Book after the game, and they just gave us pretty much 5-word answers. Very pointed, very straight to the point. KD, I think, among everyone, was the most frustrated because he personally knows, the ceiling of this team and what this team could be. And game after game, time after time, they just come up short every time. And, Katie said verbatim right now, post game, and I'm pissed. I mean, we should have won this game. We should be winning a lot more games, but like, it's just not working out for them.
At what point is this team? I mean, do we have enough evidence that this team is what it is? Like, I mean, we are now 60 games into the season or so. Like, how much more do we have to see before we just know this team? It's just not constructed. There's a missing piece. They don't have whatever it takes, whatever that is. Like, it's just not a good team that's going to be able to compete.
Yeah, and I feel like that's one of the toughest questions of the season because we saw early in the season how good this team actually could be, especially when they're all healthy. They go through this rough stretch in the middle of the season where everyone's getting injured. They come back and they're back healthy and they just can't reach, the peak that they reached at the beginning of the season. I mean, if you were to ask me personally, I'd say their ceiling is still super high, but I just think everything that's transpired, not just the injuries beyond that, the reports that come out of the locker room, the tension, blindsiding KD with throwing him in trade talks in the middle of the season. I feel like all of that is taking its toll right now. And this team is kind of just deflated.
Tonight's loss hurts in so many ways. I'm looking at the standings right now, and the 6th through the 10th seed are separated by half a game. And Phoenix, if they would have won tonight, they would have only been 3 games back of not even being in the play-in from being out of the play-in and in the playoffs. And instead, now you're sitting 4 games back of getting into the play-in at the 10 seed. You're sitting 4.5 back. I mean, just it's one thing to lose a game. It's another one to lose it to a team that you're chasing. And it feels like playoffs are the idea of making the play-in. It feels like maybe left after tonight. I mean, there is a bunch there that maybe they can catch fire, but at this point, are we just crossing out that as a hope, or where do you think with 20 games left, can they? Is there still something there where they can catch fire and make a run at this?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, and even Coach Bud and Katie and Book told us post game that they still feel like the season is salvageable. I think Coach Bud was a little more optimistic than AG and Book. I'll be honest. Then when they asked Coach Bud about it, he thought, yeah, he thought, we know who this team is at our core. We know how good we can be. But, I mean, when you ask the players, they say it's going to be difficult. They still, obviously they're going to say that they still think they have a chance, but they're admitting themselves that it's very difficult. And to your point, tonight's game was very important. And earlier today at shoot around, Devin Booker is telling us that, every game moving forward, it has to have that playoff feel because you're going to need to play 20 playoff games if you want to even make the play-in moving forward. And I'll be honest with you tonight, the first quarter, maybe they came in with that playoff intensity, but every single quarter after, they were just deflated and it looked like a team just ready to give up.
It's so hard to play with that kind of emotion. I mean, it is the very beginning of March to have that for a 20-game stretch just to get into a play-in. That's asking an awful lot from a team that has not looked really kind of connected the entire season, and that's tough. Before we jump into talking about like tonight's game, obviously, kind of 2 reports come out separate throughout today talking about the Suns. One with Book, obviously, and then, the other report about them getting ready to shop Durant this offseason. Let's start with Booker. He kind of really took a step back and backpedaled a little bit on his comments about trying to be less vocal. Did you buy any part of that? Did you buy that this is all being just a constructed narrative against him and Bud and kind of the team? Or is that just a guy that's a good soldier that's a part of the team that's really trying to help put out some fires right now?
Yeah, I think it's the latter because if there's one thing we know is that Book is not only a good teammate, but he's very coachable. And I can't really envision a world where Devin Booker of all people is going to be a difficult player to coach. Um, Obviously, he's had a whole bunch of coaches his entire career, but yeah, I think Book is just trying to clear the air, especially considering that this rest of the season is going to be extremely vital to not only their playoff chances, but frankly the future of the roster construction.
Yeah, it was the second piece that came up was talking about I don't know how much is new, I guess, off of this report. I thought it was already pretty well established that they were gonna look to move look to move Durant this offseason. But Shams comes out and kind of doubles down on that again and says unless they go on this run that they're gonna try and move it. I'm almost to the point where I'm more interested in seeing kind of the parties that are gonna be interested in them and, like, what they can possibly get back in return. But you kinda mentioned a little bit earlier, once the idea of trade talks are kinda out in the locker room and people know what's going on, that just rips the team apart. Like, I mean, there's no one wants to be there if you feel like you're not wanted, and at this point, that is I mean, there's nothing really new in that report, right? I mean, at most people expect Durant to move on this offseason because they're just not gonna have the payroll to keep him on and Beal, as well as, you're staring down the barrel of a supermax coming Booker as well.
Yeah, and if you ask me, I feel like Shams' report today was kind of obvious because you know you blindside it's one thing to put, some of your role players who are kinda underperforming in trade talks, kinda like they did with Yusuf Nurkic, but to blindside Kevin Durant, who is by far your best player this entire season, throw him in trade talks when he's extension eligible, I just feel like the Suns front office dug their own grave with this one, and it's gonna be extremely difficult to, get Durant to even wanna be a part of this franchise if when things go south and you're not able to get Jimmy Butler for Bradley Beal, which is someone who you traded for. If you're not going to be able to, get Jimmy Butler for him, and you're just going to throw Kevin Durant into trade talks after that. I mean, if you're KD, how are you going to trust this front office moving forward? How are you going to want to feel comfortable signing an extension, especially someone like KD, who is very comfortable with creating his own destiny and making moves for himself.
I'm It's gonna be fascinating to see what they can potentially get from KD this offseason. I mean, he is one of the he's getting old. Like, in basketball, he's got a lot of miles on those legs, on that body, and yet he's still producing at an insanely high clip, but I think we're getting a little bit spoiled by, like, what we see from LeBron, from Curry. Like, this isn't normal for guys this age to still be kinda producing. I mean, you look at tonight, he puts up 26 and 10, and it was kind of a little bit of a quiet night for him, but I guess let's just dive a little bit into tonight's game. He performs pretty well tonight, KD does. Booker has a pretty tough night, overall. Just what'd you think from what changed after that first quarter where it looked like they were gonna be well on their way to a good night, 34 points there, and yet they're not even able to break 100 points on the night after that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, after the first quarter, I mean, in the second quarter, they scored only 17 points, but the Timberwolves only scored 21. So you think, hey, going into the halftime, both teams are just kind of getting over this quarter where they're super ice cold. But coming out of halftime, they look deflated. I mean, there's nothing more I can say about it. They just didn't want to compete for the rest of the game, frankly. And I feel like that's been a theme a good portion of the season. But now this, energy that they're trotting onto the court with is kind of loud. I will say this game out of any other game that I've been to really felt like they were not engaged in the second half. It spoke volumes. It really did.
How much do you think that falls on Coach Bud?
That's a great question. Um, I, I I wouldn't. I don't think it'd be fair to say that Bud has lost the locker room or is close to losing the locker room. I just think this is a collective group that is they're tired. They're tired from this whole season, honestly.
That's doesn't spell well for what's going to come here down the stretch, the rest of it. Um, Curious, did anybody talk about the flagrant on Bradley Beal? Was there any mention about that in the locker room or from Coach Bud or anybody?
Nah, they it really didn't seem like they wanted to talk about anything. They were just entertaining us as the media. But no, I mean, I'll be honest with you. When I saw DiVincenzo bounce that ball, I was like, wait a second. And then I see Anthony Edwards come up behind him soaring. That might have been one of the greatest things I've seen on a basketball court. I'm kind of mad that Brad kind of broke that up. But yeah, no, they didn't talk about it at that.
That was a really weird play in that I don't know how many times I've seen a no call get reviewed and then turn into a flagrant one. Like there was nothing on the court. And also like it should be a flagrant one. I mean, if you make contact and you're not trying to go for the ball, if you just push a guy that's flying through the air, like that's an extremely vulnerable spot for Ant to be in right there. And it's kind of against basketball rules. That's something that you just don't normally do. Like there's a certain like unwritten rule book that kind of violates doing that a little bit. But then it was also really interesting that like he takes out Ant, but then Ant has no problem getting helped up from Beal like right afterwards, and like they were totally fine about it. The whole dynamic was kind of strange to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, I see what you're getting at. There might have been some frustration behind kind of that little shove, but Brad's not like that. Bradley Beal is not like that at all. He's extremely professional, extremely friendly. Nothing bad to say about Brad, but in that instance.
So they got one more game on this homestand, getting ready to take on the Clippers, who lose tonight. One of those 5 teams that they're kind of chasing for that last spot. Are we? Oh, I mean, we've said every game's it's got to have a playoff feel, but at what point do these start turning into like must wins? Especially if this is at a home game, especially if this is a team that you're chasing that's right in that bunch. Is it already there with 20 games left to go?
I mean, if you were to ask Devin Booker that, he'd say that the must wins came about 20 games ago. But yeah, I feel like every game moving forward, especially against Western Conference opponents, are must wins. And if I want to give you a little preview of Tuesday's game against the Clippers, I personally don't think it's going to go well because if there's one weakness that the Suns have, it's physicality and defense. And the Timberwolves laid it on them. They were extremely physical and they were playing scrappy defense, and it deflated them for 3 quarters. Imagine what Kawhi Leonard and this insanely gritty Clippers team is going to do to them.
That's tough. Teams, it's wearing on the team, as you said. I think it's wearing on the fans as well, and kind of watching this season and with the expectations that this team had coming in. I don't know if anyone expected them to be not even a play-in team by the time the season ends. So, boys, we're teetering on being one of the biggest disappointments I've seen from a team in a very long time.
Yeah.
Rough. Well, all right, kind of appreciate you taking some time, man, and keeping us updated. Seems like the locker room wasn't exactly as joyous as it was the other night, but things clearly to work on. Another tough game, like we said. I don't know where they go from here, but they got to figure it out in a hurry, man.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, for sure. You'll be there courtside covering it all for us, man. I appreciate all the work tonight.
Of course. Thanks for having me.